establish a quorum. Good.
Sherry Bird.
Here.
Stephanie Moran.
Here.
Nick Souter. Nancy Stubbs.
I'm here.
Mariana Valdez.
Here.
William Lammons.
Here.
Paula Lerman.
Paula, would you like to introduce our guest?
This is Paul, and he is a senior, or a sophomore at Fisher High School. He will be a junior next year. And he is applying for next year's student program for Big Fisher High School, and he wanted to just come check it out for the day and see how it works.
Welcome.
Welcome, Paul. Welcome. It's nice to have someone interested and come to see what it's really like. All right, can we have approval of the agenda, please? Do we have a motion?
I move that we approve the agenda for April 23rd, regular school board meeting.
Second.
Sherry Bird.
Aye.
Stephanie Moran.
Aye.
Nancy Stubbs.
Aye.
Mariana Valdez.
Aye.
Could we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'd like to welcome Florida Mesa and Sunnyside this evening. Florida Mesa, Vanessa Giddings will recognize outstanding students, and we will all say yay. Want to come on up, Vanessa?
Yes,
There you
it's
are.
my pleasure. Thank you so much. And Shannon Morris, my assistant principal, is also going to join us.
You guys want to give these out, please?
Thank you for welcoming our schools for the highlight every month. It's a joy to see what schools are recognizing and to welcome our families and to celebrate all the things that your children are doing. We also take this opportunity to recognize our staffs, and I want to just say that Florida Mesa is such an amazing place to work. We have, I've been the principal there now for 5 years, and we have a culture of collaboration. We have just really dedicated professionals who strive in everything they do to work to meet kids' needs and meet kids where they are. And so we're here to celebrate those staff and students this evening. The first staff member who I'd like to come up is Maureen Wankura. I've had the pleasure of supervising Maureen for the last 5 school years. She constantly displays a positive attitude. She rolls up her sleeves and she gets the job done. She's committed to her own personal growth and excellence. She accepts feedback with a smile on her face, and she's willing to adjust her practices to meet the needs of the students, staff, and families at Florida Mesa. Maureen is taking on many new roles this semester, and she's doing that with enthusiasm.
Additionally, she willingly asks questions and is open to seeking out professional development in order to refine her approaches. We've seen her become a leader in multiple areas, including on our PBIS team and supporting colleagues throughout the building. We want to thank you, Maureen, for being such a positive role model at Florida Mesa and for being part of our team.
You need to know we don't tell our staff that we're recognizing them. They had no idea that this is happening, and they're starting to become embarrassed. We tell them that they're here to recognize some students, so they're a little bit surprised. Okay, so the next staff I'd like to call up here is our entire 3rd grade team. We have Amanda Salkel, Sandy Elliott, and Kathleen Murphy. This team of teachers is above and beyond dynamic. They are determined to meet the needs of students. They facilitate facilitate learning in creative ways that engage students as the owners of their learning. All of these teachers are skilled at using the workshop model and goal setting to promote personalized learning with their students. They flexibly group students and they use their data effectively to provide intervention support to meet the needs of all types of learners. They meet every single deadline, they meet every single day, they do everything above and beyond. They're just incredibly hard workers.
And they are the most professional one of the most professional that I've seen. They're constantly seeking, they're reflective practitioners within themselves, but also among their team. They're always seeking to learn from one another and to learn from colleagues to just become and to get better and better and be the best teachers that they can be. And we so appreciate that and love having you guys on our team as well. Thank you.
Now we'd like to provide them with the opportunity to invite some students forward to recognize. So Maureen, you get to go first, my dear.
So I would like to acknowledge and recognize Ms. Lily Brown. It has been my absolute pleasure watching Ms. Lily Brown the past 6 years. My first memory of Lily was in Miss Flanagan's kindergarten class. I was assigned the duty of getting the kindergartners on the bus. I remember being very nervous about the squirrely kindergartners and afraid to put one on the wrong bus. Miss Flanagan put my worries to ease by saying, "Don't worry, Lily will get them to the right place." From that day on, I knew I could count on Lily to help me, and we tried many times in recent years to get Lily to go back to kindergarten to help me out. Lily has always been a student that you could count on. Lily has been involved in many different aspects of our school. She has done Growth on the Run in 3rd grade. During her stint in student council in the 4th grade, she was involved in a drive that they put together to collect items for Annie's Orphans, which ended up with a visit to Annie's Orphans to deliver the many items that they collected. She was involved in the science club, the buddy bench, after-school art, word of the week bulletin board, and orchestra. Her many talents also include the involvement of the talent show the last 2 years and morning announcements each chance she gets. She was very proud. Although I'm not in the classroom, I know that Lily shines bright in her academics and that she takes them very serious. I know that her classmates rely on her to help with their many different struggles. I will miss seeing what you are up to at recess in the hamburgers and your problem-solving skills with your classmates. I asked her what her favorite part of school was. Her answer, field trips and school, of course. Lily, you are a no-nonsense kind of gal, a true leader, and you will go far in life in whichever direction you choose, but I will be happy to vote for you when you run for President of the United States.
Okay, Kathleen Murphy. I'm recognizing James Tate.
This year, James has shown exceptional academic and social maturity for his age. Despite several challenges that James has faced, he appears professional at all times and comes to school prepared with a focus and dedication to his study. We have chosen to highlight James because it's apparent that he values his education and understands the importance of his presence and focus in the classroom. At times when his attention drifts, James takes responsibility for his actions and has an awareness about himself and others that allows him to reflect in a way that benefits his academic growth. James has also made huge strides this year in completing fluency. He uses strategies because he understands how they benefit his learning and expresses his feelings of success or frustration in a responsible way. competition this year. At the beginning of the year, I quickly noticed that Jacob saw numbers in a different way than most of his students. I was ecstatic about this and excited for him to share these creative ways with his peers. Unfortunately, Jacob did not feel the same way and became easily frustrated when he could not solve problems using the strategies that others were using. He continued to get discouraged as he learned new strategies and was unable to understand them. At one point, he even declared himself as being terrible at math. Although he was struggling with fitting into this norm, he chose to be a risk taker and have an open mind. As he began believing in himself and developing a growth mindset, Jacob began seeing how his strategies related to the ones that we were discovering in class, and even decided that some were more efficient than his own. He is now eager to engage in his math learning and always willing to share his strategies with his peers. Jacob, I'm proud of how far you have come as a mathematician this year, and more importantly, how much you have grown as a young man. Always believe in yourself and embrace that creative thinking.
Okay, Sandy Elliott.
I would like to highlight Lucas Blackwell. So, Lucas and his family are new to our school this year, and formal schooling was a new adventure for him. And we've seen an amazing amount of growth, perseverance, and dedication to his learning. Lucas comes to school every morning prepared to absorb as much information as he possibly can. And because of this, he has advanced several grade levels in a short period of time. Lucas has a quiet demeanor and is an observer who likes to take in information and process it before showing you what he knows. He's very self-reflective, and he makes awesome connections between his learning and his life outside of school. He's a marvelous part of our community, and he's seen as a role model amongst his peers and teachers. And it has been pure joy to watch you, Lucas, as you find your identity as a learner this year.
Miss Papa's going to take a picture of us, and then we're going to shake the hand of the board.
They're a cute bunch.
Okay, now we're going to go this way and shake hands.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for the work.
Very delightful to meet you. Great job.
Yeah, we'd like to invite Anita Walker from Sunnyside Elementary up, please.
Hello. Thank you for having us. I've been looking forward to this night, actually, since I found out, can you hear me? Since I found out that schools get to highlight. And so I was thinking, what are some things that really make Sunnyside unique? And three things came to mind. One was around innovation. There's a spirit of innovation in that school that I admire. The ability to build relationships with kids and families is deep and very powerful in that school. And then the thing I think that just really shines when you look at the teachers who do some really powerful work with kids, it's the teachers who do child-centered work, and so they either can follow the lead of the child or they have a classroom that meets the needs of the individual kids. So, in an effort to highlight student work and student learning at Sunnyside, I'm going to recognize three teachers, and then they've got something to show. So either there's a video or a vignette or students.
So Dr. Lisa Suchek, the first one, she's our preschool teacher. And she does an amazing job with our kids. I'm nervous, but I'm just going to keep talking today. She does such a great job with our preschool kids. I think sometimes our youngest learners are overlooked as far as like the work and dedication that it takes to lead that. And really respect what kids are learning. She's done an amazing job here, so we'll see if they have that. Next is Lorraine Dotson. So Lorraine, when I think of Lorraine, I think of innovation, and Sunnyside would not be the same place without her. So grateful that she's there. She's got a video to share of her students, so she'll go second. But just really grateful for her leadership and her ability to step out of the box for herself and for her students every day. Rachel Gurr, she's our fourth grade teacher, and one of the things that I want to highlight about her is her ability to really pull the best out of kids. And one of the ways that I've seen that she does that is the way she builds relationships with students and community within her classroom, so all students are able to thrive where they're at. Dr. Lisa will go first, then Lorraine, then Rachel will have her students come up and read. So, yeah, you can sit down.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to share a little bit about what's happening in your school at Sunnyside. It has been my honor and pleasure to bring to Sunnyside, to the classroom, to enact for children the things that I learned in graduate school, the most cutting-edge, rigorous brain research and early childhood education. So, we can go to the next slide. I'm just going to cover a couple main focuses of the classroom. One is the concept of regulation. Regulation is a state of mind. Children must be regulated in order to play and learn. Children need to be taught self-regulation. These are some pictures of examples of children learning to regulate themselves, calming themselves in a quiet place, using some gross motor activity to calm and regulate themselves, co-regulating with another child. Next slide. Teaching children strategies and giving them opportunities to self-regulate creates a state of mind where they are ready to learn. It also supports executive function. Executive function is the skills that all academic learning is based on. If you are self-regulated, you can do these kinds of activities, then you are actually ready for academic learning in kindergarten. Next slide, please. So, children who are regulated learn through play. We have a variety of activities for children. All these children are in a regulated state of mind. They're focused, they're able to control their impulses, and they have long extended periods of time in my classroom to have self-directed play. We do a variety of things, dramatic play. Here's a little hydrology going on here with some pumps and basters. Here's another dramatic play. We have some chefs in the kitchen. STEM education. Here are engineers. Here are chemists doing a little physics over here. This is how sophisticated play can be if children are given an opportunity. Another important part of my classroom is that I have a process-oriented art education focus. So instead of having everybody, we're all going to make a bunny rabbit with this paper and these cotton balls, the emphasis is on the process so that it is creative and it's open-ended. When children have opportunities to have open-ended, creative, process-oriented art education, they start creating amazing works. All of the things that you're going to see are their ideas, their design. I didn't tell them to do these things. Next slide. Right here, this is actually a 3D recycled art sculpture. This is Jack's Tyrannosaurus Rex, no, Triceratops. Over here is a plane that kids made, just out of cardboard scraps. And we also do music, dance, here is a rhinoceros that one of our students made. These children made a helmet, skis, and poles, and they're skiing around the classroom. And this is a transformer outfit that one of our students makes. When children have those opportunities to have open-ended, self-directed play, that's where they go.
Anita asked me to highlight some of the things we are doing at Sunnyside with regards to computer science and technology. Not what I am doing, but what our entire school is doing. I have a short video to show you. None of what you are about to see would have happened without the extensive support of Dan. So thank you very much, Dan. DEF, and there's also a Century Over grant here you see in there. Also, with your grace, please know this is not a Julie Pop Elvira production. And Sarah has graciously agreed to adjust the audio as needed. All of what you're about to see is a very young work in progress. And our computer science focus at Sunnyside is on digital citizenship, coding, and using robotics to help students make a connection between the coding and a practical application. So in the video, you're going to see a little bit of our AR/VR part, augmented reality, virtual reality. You will see the kids with the virtual reality headsets. Then you will see a couple of fourth graders collaborating on some coding, a couple of second graders doing coding some dot and dash robots, and a couple of third graders coding some Lego Weaving robots. And at the very end is not my production. It is a fifth grade digital production about being a digital citizen. And I am most proud of these fifth graders because they were able to create their production without violating copyright, which is very challenging for them. So as you watch this, I would especially like to encourage school board members to be thinking about how we as a district might make computer science a reality in all of our elementary schools.
Okay, so take a look at this, please.
It's just not very loud. Yeah, I can hear it.
How to Be a Global Digital Citizen by Colton Cheese and Aiden Cassis. Don't answer to someone you don't know or trust. Be careful what you say on the computer. Don't watch 2 or more hours of technology. Do other outdoor activities instead of technology. Make sure you give credit to the owner of the picture. Ignore pop-ups trying to give you free things. Keep food and drinks away from the computer. Make sure there is nothing in between the .com and the /. Make sure to be a global digital citizen.
I'm going to ask one of my students to come up, and I could talk forever about these students, but I'm just going to say just a little bit, and then they are hoping that it's okay if they share a little bit of their writing with you as proof of their who they are. So I'd like to start with Siri. Okay. So we've been working on writing a lot this year. And some of the things that help us be really good writers is to study other authors. And so I'm really excited about what Siri has to share. But first, I just want to tell you a little bit about Siri. Siri is quiet, but she's very cheerful. And she's new to Sunnyside this year. And she's quickly become a leader in our class. She's passionate about animals. She loves to learn, and she loves to read a good book. Most of all, what I'm most proud of is that she's so courageous. It takes a lot of courage to go to a new school and to be different. And it takes a lot of courage to overcome some challenges, like thinking you're bad at math. And it takes a lot of courage to let your creativity shine for others to see. So her writing is beautiful, and it's a reflection of who she is. No matter what she writes, her voice is strong, and she's able to connect to her readers with imagery and emotion. So she's going to read a nonfiction piece. Sorry, I'm crying. So she's just going to read a part of her nonfiction. We did a lot of research on energy. So start.
Solar energy. Imagine our Earth without any source of electricity except for the power of the sun. This is called solar energy. Solar energy can be misunderstood in many ways. In the following, you will learn the solar energy benefits, drawbacks, and how it's changed into electricity. Did you know that electricity is everywhere and so is energy? Solar energy is one of the many energies that can transform into electricity. The first step is solar energy comes from the sun. Then the energy gets processed into the solar panel. The atoms in the solar panels are made up of silicon cells. The silicon cells go into the inverter, which is chemical energy. Then the inverter gets powered into the meter. In addition to that, the meter energy in the storage battery, which will be electrical energy. Now the solar power gets processed into the house, which would be either light energy or thermal energy. After that, the solar energy gets repeated over and over again. Finally, the house gets to use the energy in many different ways. Solar energy can be misunderstood in several ways. The fate of the world depends on its changing energies we use to the point of those energies being unavailable and using renewable sources such as the power of the sun. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Florida Mesa and Sunnyside. That was incredible. We just are always in awe of what you accomplish in your schools. Thank you so much. Okay, 5A, update and presentation on lab classrooms.
We'd like to invite Dylan Cannell and several of our teachers to come up. If you want to pull chairs up with you, we're going to do a true linkage-style conversation. So one of the things we want to highlight tonight is this concept of a lab classroom. It's at Max.
I like trying to get Steve to do additional effects on our voices.
So our lab classroom visits are really highlighting the experts that we have in our district and really getting our teachers into classrooms of their peers to really highlight excellent practice. And the teachers you have in front of you are great examples of the expertise we have in our district. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Cannell to share a little about the lab classroom effort and the work that these great teachers have been doing. So Dr. Cannell.
Thank you all for an opportunity to link up tonight. Last year, I don't know if you remember, it's not making any noise, so I'll try to speak even louder.
Pull it towards him.
Last year, I don't know if you remember, but we had a parade of lab hosts and filled up the room with about 30 people. And I thought that was such an interesting and unique way to celebrate all of the lead learning that was going on among all of the people who are willing to open up their classrooms and lead the learning. This year, I thought it would be just kind of interesting for you to get to dig a little deeper and understand the story that each of these teachers and the specialists who work with them has to tell, and to be able to ask questions to better understand the model of learning that we hope to continue for a long time here. In order to do that well, I felt like it would be important to give you some context about kind of the whole big picture view of the investment that we're making in teachers in their professional learning and in our collaborative and collective efficacy. So pardon a little bit of a storytelling, but I want to do that and then open it up for really celebrating these great lead learners around me by giving them a chance to speak with you about the work that they're doing and the impact that it has, both on them as individuals and professionals, but also as a community of learners in Durango 9R. So thanks again for the opportunity to share tonight and to link with you. Some of you were on the board a few years ago when we sat in this room and I was trying to explain my vision for professional learning. We were really, Leanne and I were thinking a lot about innovative approaches to try to attend to, yes, the system, but also the practices and the people who do that work. And so from that, there's this origin of a small team of us who are focused precisely on the intersection between teacher and learner, our teaching and learning, and we call ourselves the instruction team. And with that, we set forth to say, well, in Durango, we're starting something a little new here. And so let's get really tight on what our success would be and how we want to interact and foster connections between all of the great educators that we have here. So there's an investment that you all made several years back. Some of it was about practices that we would be elevating, and a lot of it was about the infrastructure that we're building to try to have collaborative and collective shared learning. And so thank you for that investment, and I hope tonight you get to hear about some of the outputs and results of that we hope to continue. So Joyce and Showers have done some research for 20 years now, and time again what we find out is the best professional learning, or the professional learning that has the greatest impact on practice, is the kind of learning where theory, modeling, practice, and coaching are all embedded into your system. And so really what we're trying to do is model and have an opportunity and oh, Steve, you can hear me now. All right, so really what we're trying to do is have this model where both on the macro level, and we're really looking at year-long inquiry cycles. This year, people, even though we didn't go public and say this is the year of, we talked a lot about intentional and reflective practice and complex thinking and transfer. And those two things are, we have great thinking and learning and practices as a result of that this year. And so we really look at a year-long model, and then also within that model, cycles of inquiry where people get to dig around in theory, better construct their own understanding, model that or have that modeled to them or with them, practice it in a safe place, and then ongoing coaching for professional risk-taking. So what Joyce and Showers found out was when we have those pieces working together, there's a 95% opportunity or chance that practice will change in the classroom. And there's lots of other numbers, but anything short of having those parts working together doesn't yield the results that we want for our students. So our team has rallied around a vision. I think it's important to kind of give you a little bit of that about how we interact with the rest of our system. So we really, our whole purpose, why we exist as a small team of coaches and instructors is to inspire and equip other people to their greatest success. And so we really stay in the role of coach and we stay in the role of supporter so that these great people and many others will be inspired and equipped to be as successful as they're striving to be. We believe in providing embedded PD that not only develops effective practices, but also, even more importantly, honors people's reflective capacity and allows people to have the time and space to be intentional and to think about the impact and the efficacy that they have. And so we really, again, stay in a coaching role. We elevate lead learners. We don't perceive expertise or experts, but we really want a constructivist model where we're all learning together. So our success is dependent upon three things: developing others' capacity through continual and relational PD, ensuring all students are competent, and providing constructivist opportunities for people to be risk takers. To this end, we design interactions that connect educators. In fact, our goal as a team this year is to foster connections between and within teachers. And we follow inquiry cycles at a micro level and a macro level. Some examples of that, and I promise I'm getting to the lab soon. Some examples of the orchestrated symphony that we're trying to conduct is August 14th Professional Learning Conference, where we had educators educating one another. And we were able to provide a lot of local lead learners to lead sessions on things that really align with our context and our instructional approaches. Another investment that you all have made for years now that has developed our infrastructure and our capacity to make this long-lasting and sustaining change is we do take trips to go to Avid Summer Institute, Thinking Strategies Institute, Minds on Math, where we're learning from what we used to think were the gurus, and now those organizations are saying, actually, the gurus are here, and we want to send other people to come learn from what your teachers are doing. So that's a pretty neat switch in a few years. Additionally, we have Durango Learning Labs, which I'll tell you a little more about, classroom-hosted visits, which are very organic and grassroots to the degree where a teacher or a few may say, we'd really like to learn more about something, and we organize the right time, space, and resources to get them with their colleagues to learn about that. And then the specialists are working with teams and individuals in data and coaching cycles throughout the year, all aligned to the elements of effective instruction and the practices that we are learning together. So that's our work. Our focus for tonight is to celebrate on this one piece of that big big program or big suite of things that we hope to offer to people. And we really built these to, again, inspire and equip educators. So labs have some particular criteria and things that we hold really, when you think of the term lab, I think it's easy to kind of go to what the science lab, where experimentation is happening and there's multiple variables and there's some things that are not yet known. So in that traditional sense of a lab, and we get to tinker with things and experiment with our design to figure out what's going to really work best in the right circumstances and in the right environment. So labs really follow that, and there's some things again that are near and dear to our hearts and important for us to keep and hold. So that is that we will all remain in the stance of constructivist learners, meaning that we believe every educator comes with their own reflective capacity and the ability to learn some theory and practice and go and make that really relevant and intentional in their own practice. So it's not about shoving ideas or pushing an agenda. It's about opening up environments for constructivist and meaningful embedded learning. We do look for some particular criteria in the host. The 3 learners that are here today exemplify this greatly every day in their practice. Those 2 criteria are that they consistently demonstrate reflective capacity. In other words, the learning on their end never stops. Daily, you can find these teachers. It's funny, as the coaches talk about the interactions that they have, these teachers are out coaching the coaches. They're going out ahead and saying, before they even walk out of the room, they're measuring the impact on student achievement and on the interactions that students were having and determining immediately at a microscopic and macroscopic level what adaptations and refinements need to occur. And additionally, they're consistently, we can walk into their classroom any day and have these high yield practices aligned to our elements of effective instruction. And it's not an event when someone's in their room. They've just learned and led learning to the degree that there's the consistency and the quality of their practice. So that takes an immense amount of work, and we're so appreciative for them to be leading all of our learning because it's not an easy task. And the vulnerability that it takes and the doggedness that it takes to push yourself every day to have that authentic reflection and say, did I make the impact that I intended to make, is a massive undertaking and something very noble. Another part of labs that's really important is there's a facilitator who is keenly aware of the instructional go-fors that the lead learner or the host is implementing. From everything from what is that host identity as an educator, their belief set, their core values, what practices are they going after, what are they learning, what's new for them, what's their vulnerable spot. And so the facilitator plays a very important role in keeping that lead learning at the center of the work. And just logistically what it is it's a group of people who rally around a theory and practice for a day and construct their meaning. Our labs are built around a full day of investigating the work, aligned to the elements of effective instruction, aligned to practices that we've been learning a lot about recently. And then we end always with a commitment to implementation. It's going public or naming things that we're committed to implementing when we get back to our classrooms. This year, again, our through line, the thing that every single lab that we had some relation to cognitive demand and complex thinking and transfer. I believe it's one of the most important things that we should focus on if we want our students to be creative, critical thinking problem solvers. So by the numbers, here's what we've done so far with labs. There's been 18 Durango Learning Labs this year. We had 17 unique hosts. There were, as participants, there were 187 educators from 9R. We did something new this year. People are very interested in the way that we're learning together. And we had 30 people from either Fort Lewis College, Betcher residents, or teachers and leaders from other schools in the region. We had 31 classroom hosted visits with 77 participants in those, for a total of this internal embedded kind of learning lab model, 264 participants in that learning this year. So enough of my talking now. Let me introduce the great people around the table. So, and there's much more story, and hopefully they'll get a chance to tell that through your questions. But Kelly, Tim, no, that's not Tim. Kelly, Jackie, and Tim are teachers. Kelly's at Florida Mesa, Jackie's at Animas Valley, and Tim is at Park. And I've already talked a little bit about the lead learner stance that they take and the consistency in their practice and their reflection. But I don't know, I'm a little bit, I kind of want to like tell each of your stories, but I've already talked for too long. They're fantastic people. They're educators committed to every student. And like I said before, they're dogged in their reflection and their willingness to continue learning about themselves, about their students, and about their work, so that it is of the highest caliber each and every day. And again, we had 15 other people who met those criteria and exemplified those practices in the same way this year. And that's only because we don't have the infrastructure to facilitate any more than that. There's many other people who are dogged like that in their practice and in the refinements each day. So, and then we have Julia and Mary, who are instructional specialists, and they work with these teachers. We also have Matt and Bree on our team. They just happened to be married and had a baby last week. So, they got a pass on tonight. So I guess at this point, Julia and Mary, do you want to say anything more about how awesome these guys are or anything else before we open it up? Yeah, I talked way more than you are already done. You're like, let's go home. All right, so we'll just open up for questions and I'll pass this thing around.
To start. You want to?
I guess I'd start with a question, if I may, for the teachers who are lab hosts. Tell us a little about what you gain from it. Certainly everyone who comes to your classrooms are gaining, but I think sometimes we forget that as a host you're also gaining. So I'd love to just hear maybe some reflection on that. So whoever would like to go first.
I think for me is the reflection piece, is that constant, when people are asking questions, it's like, oh, why did I do that? And so it's that constant going back to intentionality. What was my intentionality behind the moves that I made? Was there intention? But it's really, for me, after I walk away, it's that feeling of being reflective and having people, even through their questions, asking me why I did things and then me reflecting on it with Julia and also with them as a group too. So I think for me, it's that constant cycle of how I can better my practice for my students to be successful.
I echo what Kelly says, and really paying attention to what matters most to you and why. Like, why do we do what we do for students, and what do we really want our students to walk away with? I also love the aspect of what Dylan and his team have created. It's a community generator, and teaching can be a very, at times, isolating experience. You're doing everything you can within the walls of your classroom for your kids, and sometimes you're peeking out and going, what else is going on? And what I love about hosting labs and attending them is that the conversations continue and the relationships continue. People are texting each other back and forth and sending resources and receiving them and calling each other and meeting for coffee. And that happens organically. It comes because people just can't get enough of trying to solve a problem or become better at what they do. And I love that aspect of labs. As Dylan said, it's constructivist. Nobody is making anyone do anything, and yet it brings people together under a common intention, a common lens, and it's a really beautiful part of our 9R community that has strengthened from last year to this year.
Nice, Adam. So one thing that I noticed that we have done differently this year from last year, and even in Denver, is that when you go to the lab, typically you meet with the lab host and you talk, and then you go on through the PD without them. And something we've changed this year is Julia has invited us in to actually participate within the PD. So then we get to have those conversations with Rich. It's not necessarily so much anymore the lab host, but it's actual just to talk about your practice. And so that's been a big change and a shift to, then it does create that way for us to communicate with each other and have those emails back and forth.
And I'll echo the cross-district relationships that have formed because of these labs have been really valuable. And I've attended labs and also been a lead learner in the lab. And when I attend labs, I always leave with something that I want to try the next day. But also, as the lead learner in the lab, I always leave with something I want to do the next day too, whether it's because of just the dialogue I have with my colleagues, or if it's because of some readings that we had, or just the openness of everybody sharing different ideas. I always left with something like, I'm going to try this tomorrow, which I guess I didn't expect going into it.
Go ahead, do that first.
So what are your recommendations as teachers and as lab leaders for this moving forward, either to go more broadly or to go deeper? Where would you like to see this go?
I think it all starts with the coaching and the value behind the coaching, because none of this would have been possible without having building level coaches. I think we have lots of opportunities in our buildings for coaching already. It's been more of a feedback-based coaching situation, because we have our building level principals who are torn in 97 different directions. So I think having this, having a connection with the coach from the district has been really valuable. So increasing that, I guess. And just the relationship between the coach and the coachee, or the mentor-mentee relationship, it takes time to grow. So we always feel like that needs to be in the back of our minds when we're looking at these types of things. Like it's always going to get bigger. It's always going to get better.
I think the particular people that are on this team are critical. None of this would happen without Dylan and Julia and Bree and Mary and Matt. I named everyone, right?
That's it.
Yes. They are so thoughtful and so skilled. Sometimes I seek out a lab just because Julia is facilitating it. And they have a quiet, very modest form of doing what they do. And it's important to recognize that they're at the heart of that. So maintaining this department, absolutely.
So I do have a question. It kind of follows up on yours, is that is this volunteer, or do people get selected to be in this, or is it voluntary?
Which part? To be a host?
The learner, the what? Yeah. If somebody wants to come into a lab, is that they're volunteer? They're self-selecting.
Yeah, because it's internal, we've just developed a system where we communicate those through a hokey poster, and it's in our ERO. No, actually, the posters are great, and yeah, they're really cool.
I thought maybe it was a brand name.
I might take that. Yeah, hashtag hokey. So we started a marketing campaign, I guess, this year. We put them in bathrooms and in the mailboxes and things like that. It's in the ERO course catalog. We basically have, this year we had 3 windows. So there was a fall, and what we're really trying to do in those is catch things as they're emerging. Unfortunately, our lab hosts are pretty efficient in their practice, and people left saying, well, I thought we were going to get to see the messy stuff. And so it was just kind of a testament to how quickly we can get students into that deep learning. But yeah, it's totally voluntary. Obviously, our passion is to inspire and equip an entire community. So we want to find the right pathways that match both the needs of our organization and the desires of the individuals. So as a team, we're constantly measuring that. I do lots of walks around buildings to just measure instruction at the airplane view, and say, how, what's going to be that element? What's going to be that thing that's going to turn something on for these students? That's going to revolutionize our system, so that all students, when we say all, really will be successful. So I'm constantly, that's kind of my role on the team. And then the specialists are working tightly and closely with individuals. So in terms of participants, people who come and participate, it is voluntary. We try to cap it typically at around 15 participants, because any more than that, and we start to have more adults than kids in the room. But we definitely have more people, and it doesn't seem to interrupt things too much.
And my question was
about the hosting.
No, my question is, it's sort of like preaching to the choir. I mean, you guys are excellent teachers, and you're attracting other teachers who want to be better. So it's kind of like, when it's volunteer, it's people want to be a part of it because they want to improve. But I guess my question is, how do you broaden that desire or that knowledge base out to people who aren't a part of the choir yet? How can they learn that they have a voice that might be appreciated as well, even if they're squeaky in the shower or whatever? But that's what I'm curious about, because sometimes these really great opportunities, the people who take advantage of them are the people who are already good, right? And so we want everybody to be good. It's like you try to help your weakest link, wherever that might be. And I'm just curious how you see us being able to, I speak very broadly.
Please join. Yeah, come on in.
How you see us being able to take this exceptional professional development system and make, or want everyone to want it, get everyone to want it.
Yeah, so Kelly looks like she has something really important to say, so I'll get out of the way pretty quickly. But first, I'll just say that although I wouldn't think of it in terms of the weakest link, I think for me, I think in terms of first adopters.
Yeah, there you go.
Dan used to show this video where there's a guy at a music festival that dances alone, and then he was just going to be that guy dancing alone until one came on. That first follower came and joined, and then it started a movement. I think that's probably a better metaphor. And this year being really a second full year of implementation, if I were to kind of try to say who are our first adopters and now who are our first followers, or there's other models of reluctant, not to have a negative connotation, but it's appropriate to be reflective and reluctant when you're trying something new. And so we're working with people who have been reluctant to consider instructional change already. So that is already happening. And of course, I'm passionate and desperate to really support all. And so any ideas you have about, I don't think a compliance idea is going to be it. I think it's culture and community.
I'm just kind of thinking of how do you make this, how do you get the word out? And it sounds like
I think it's just be so awesome that other people are attracted to it.
Be so awesome.
Yeah.
Right.
So
People
Kelly
who are
wanted to
awesome
add
usually don't toot their own horns either, so.
At the beginning of the year in September, early September, I did a lab on intentionality. And then the following week, I also did the same lab on intentionality. And the first, usually it's primary teachers that come. Like I've never really had high school teachers or middle school teachers come. It's typically K-5 teachers that come because I'm primary, first grade. So I had, I believe, one high school teacher, the first round. So I think my first round, I had one high school teacher that was there. And so Julie and I were talking about the participants coming for the following week, and at one point she was like, oh, it's 9, and then all of a sudden it jumped to 14. And I was like, what's going on? She was like, well, the high school teacher actually went back to his holidays and talked about what the practices I was doing, the intentionality behind it, and the professional development that they received, that they really encouraged their colleagues to come down to the first grade classroom and watch. And so we had, I think the majority of that group was a lot of high secondary.
Great.
Yeah, secondary.
Great.
So I think it is that whole starting just the trickle effect. So it really is.
Great. Yeah.
Really just. So that's a great question. And I'm assuming my colleagues are paying attention just like I am to the labs that are coming up. For example, there's one coming up around student ownership of learning at primary level. So I know my school places we need to improve practice. So I go and talk to people. I have 4 teachers going to this who probably would have picked up on this. So I think it's a group effort around people choosing in, but I also think there's some real, what do they say, things that you can have.
Encouragement.
Encouragement, yeah.
Very willing to do it, been well received.
Yep.
So it's
Great.
a lot of things packed into it.
Thank you, Doug.
When you do it well, people want to be a part of it.
If I could ask a question that really I want the board to hear the answer, because sometimes we get, this is very time intensive for teachers. So we'll hear parents who will say, oh, my teacher's out of their classroom more this year because of thinking strategies and because of lab visits. Could you as teachers kind of reflect on this type of PD compared to maybe the traditional PD where you go someplace, you attend a workshop, and you come back to your room? Because I do think it's something our board needs to really hear, because they will hear, and they do hear from parents who say, gosh, you know, my teacher's been out 5 days this year. I want them in front of my kid. And the reality is labs and thinking strategies and those type of workshops really, I think, have a great impact. So I'd love for you to share your thoughts on that.
I believe it endures, you know, like unlike other professional developments or forms of PD where you attend, you leave a lot behind and you come back and you have general statements like, wow, that was so valuable, it was so great, and you have great intention to share out, but it feels like too monumental, too huge of a task to actually get done. And you also, like in the back of your mind, you begin to wonder, is any of this really doable? I saw it up in Denver. I saw it in a conference room. But what we do here is in real time. It's in classrooms with kids that are just like ours. And so you leave with a sense of doability, and like Tim said, with real actions that you're committed to trying the next day. So I think it's the best bang for your buck. You also leave with kind of like accountability, because you see some of the same people that you had the conversations with and you learned to side with, and you're constantly reminded, this is something we are working towards. This is something we want to try. There's no anonymity like at a conference up in Denver. Like, we're all in this together. So that's my 2 cents. I think it sustains, and I think it's actually kind of genius. What they put together here in Durango. It also, the culture of opting in, I think is extremely powerful. If you've ever been to a meeting before where people are required to be there, their behavior shifts, right? Like, they're on their phones, they're not fully paying attention, they're not committed. But the concept of signing up for specific PD and spreading the word and seeing it capped and, oh no, it's full, I'm going to try to sign up for the other session. Teachers show up raring to go and just excited to use all of the time they have there to do the most learning and the most absorption that is possible. So I think it's extremely efficient and powerful and effective.
Teaching can feel pretty isolating a lot of times. You can go through your whole day without having an adult conversation. So actually seeing it done, or seeing somebody doing it in real time, as Jackie was saying, can be really powerful. Oh, it can be done. And you know, her clientele is similar to my clientele. Like, I can do this. Yeah, I just want to piggyback on what you said.
And I'm going to piggyback off of what they were saying too. I've been with the district for 6 years now. And when I first came into the district, we would meet on Mondays during our PLC time as a whole first grade span. So you would meet in your whole grade level, like all the district teachers from kinder would meet together for a second. And I remember always leaving feeling frustrated because we could never agree on what's best practice or what is, we were talking a lot about theory and what our beliefs were. And actually, I worked with Tim when I first came into the district. I knew who Tim was, and it was like, hey, you know, we were just formal with each other. But now going through this lab process, I've actually gotten to know him as a teacher and watching him put his theory into practice has been very powerful, where now I feel like I can go to him, even though he's teaching third grade. I, at the beginning of the year, sent him an email saying, why is my math workshop failing? Tell me what you did. So it is having that piece where you do build relationships and you do build trust, and it's one of those things where if you go into those meetings and you're talking about your beliefs, others might not resonate with it, but then you go into the lab and you're seeing those beliefs actually in practice, so that all kids can achieve at high levels, then you start to question yourself of, okay, let me go and check my beliefs. So I think it was a very, very powerful PD that it's changed me completely as a teacher over the last 3 years. Working closely with Julia and Dylan through this process has been who I am, and also with my admin has definitely shaped me to the professional that I am.
Well, it's been fascinating to listen to you all. For those of us who started our teaching education a long time ago, you know, PD was they brought you a big fat spiral notebook, dumped it on your desk, and maybe you got 3 hours. It was never an intimate situation. The PD that you're talking about really does create intimacy, and intimacy creates lasting change. And so I really appreciate that. It's funny that you used the word passion, because for a while I hated that word. It was sort of, it meant anything and everything. It meant I had a lot of energy, but what I like about this, I say it's passion and action based on the 4-part model. That's passion that has, again, some lasting meaning and import to us as educators and to our students. I never have trouble with you distilling what we're doing in the district. All of our administrators who are doing this work are really good at saying, here's why we're doing what we're doing, here's what we're doing, and here's how the teachers are using it. I love this model of bringing the teachers to us so that you can tell us, really, the passion and action. So I'm just very thankful. If you build it, they will come. I happen to have seen Kevin Costner last weekend, so
In real life.
I'm very in real life, and so I'm very keyed in. But I think that's it. Success and energy and passion that makes a difference in the classroom is what will bring more and more of them.
Well, and then I have a follow-up question. So you're spreading the gospel, right? Okay, that's great. And you're doing that. Are you guys finding ways to assess whether this model and this practice is improving student achievement? And if so, I'd like to see some of those results. So, you know, our students in the classrooms of people who have been a part of or are using this intentional practice, are they achieving at a higher level than for other places across the district? Or how are their achievements? I don't know that we have to even do a comparison, but are they achieving? Those would be great things to see as well, since we're supposed to be results oriented.
You all can answer that right now.
Yeah, I think a video before and after, and even our own classrooms would be, it's still, I go back to how I was teaching math 3 years ago and how I teach math now, and because of all this, it's completely different. And I used to have a lot of redirects that I was giving out to kids, lots of things going on that I was like, why are my kids not in class? Why are they not engaged? And I don't feel like that's happening as much now. So I can confidently say it's because of all this. It started 2 or 3 years ago when I went to TSI and continued through this whole process. And now classroom management is something I don't really think about anymore. Whereas before it was at the forethought of what I was doing and how I planned every day. And I don't need to do that now. So I've created more time for supplementing all the lessons, and the kids are learning and engaged. It's been great.
And data.
Data, that's what I'm asking
I was gonna
about.
say, how do you know they're doing better?
Yeah, I mean, personal assessment of your stuff.
There's not a lot of data I can share.
Well, not right now.
But even like iReady data.
Yeah.
If we want to use that.
If I ready, my kids have gone up. I don't know, I
Yeah.
Yeah, but as a district, what we should be looking at is, what's the efficacy of our investment in this? And the way that we see that is the results, the data, right? And we don't have to be 100% data, hard data driven. We can certainly use, you know, your satisfaction as a teacher and all of that other kind of stuff. But I think for us, what we really want to see so that we can continue to support something that's good is it making a difference?
I would love to have like data if I wasn't doing it before, how I'm teaching now. I don't have that, I guess. So this is my first year in third grade, so I don't really have data to speak to in that way. My kids have shown a ton of growth.
But there might be some from other teachers who have not yet participated. I know it's not a perfect match and the design wouldn't be ideal, but.
And the redirect, so the student engagement, like the fact that you're doing less redirects or less like discipline actions with your students shows like more student engagement, and then that's a leading indicator for student
But you have to be able to
achievement.
quantify it. Right?
Yeah, so if you could go back and look at those records kind of thing of how many students are you sending down to the principal's office sort of thing compared to before, that could be a really neat way to kind of measure
Well,
one part of it.
and when it's in the beginning, you don't have the longevity of the data. You can just say, are they successful? You know, are they meeting our goals? Are they, you know, are they learning? Do they know more than do they know enough? That I'm not saying it right, but like when you begin something, you start the data and you just say, what am I measuring against? You know, am I looking at state results? Am I looking at district results? And are we there? Are we above it or below it? And again, I was a long time, sort of long time, elementary teacher. I hated data because it stripped the humanness from the child. And it was like, yeah, he scored that, but his attitude, his behavior, his passion was so much that it made that little score seem insignificant. But when you're looking at investing in programs and that we need some of each. And I appreciate the stories, but we also need to know, are they successful? And again, it doesn't have to be a comparison so much to your past, but where are they now? Are they meeting expectations?
I think to see the level of learning that kids have is probably the biggest piece. I mean, I love data too, and I do teach that. These guys can swear to that, but I think the biggest thing for me is seeing a kid who can't read well, grappling to just read this problem just so he can get at the meat of it and try to solve this math problem. That's not something that kids are doing.
And when you figure that out, I'd like to come to one of your workshops because I can't get my college students to do that.
And that's one of our goals, is love of learning, lifelong learning, and it's hard to quantify, but we can use some subjective measures and we can use stories to show that. But what you're doing sounds amazing. I was the day of when, what did they call it, even coaching or something, where you popped into somebody's room and you took your notes and you went away and nothing happened. And people were reluctant, like, I don't want them looking at me, you know, and I don't want to judge them, and it was a mess. But it sounds like out of that chaos, they kind of figured out where to go with it and make something good out of it. And it sounds like that you guys are that phoenix that's come out of that, and that's wonderful.
The other thing that happens with data, sorry, I didn't mean to.
Oh, no, it's okay.
The other thing that happens with data and collecting data is that when, and it might not be any of us, it could be in the future, and somebody starts talking about changes in budget or, you know, things like that, and you start to look at what do we say, what do we not say, things like that. Having data really helps solidify and justify maintaining those programs that are valuable. So I encourage you all, like Nancy said, it doesn't have to be all dry, but I encourage you all to figure out ways to, and maybe you already do, and I'd love to hear about it, but anyway, if you're already collecting data, that's yay. If you're not,
I'm
think
trying to
about it.
monitor my airtime.
I know.
and give Jill a
Yeah,
chance to talk.
sorry.
So, yeah,
Go ahead.
Yes, we are.
Sorry, I interrupted you too.
I would love to sit down and look at, so we invested in iReady this year, and that has been a really good, we've never had like a real, I mean, we have DIBELS, we have like CMAS, and for the
We
other grades.
saw some of that
yeah.
tonight. There's some of it here.
Yeah, and looking at, we've never really for primary had anything that was math. And so this year already, I have students that came in early kinder that are already at end of first grade. So technically, they've already made, you have your, help me with it, stretch growth, which is like over a year and a half worth of growth, which is not common. Like, hopefully you'll get there, but then you have your typical growth, which means that you met a year. So that stretch growth is really closing those gaps. And so looking at my data this year and looking at where the kids are, it definitely aligns with what I'm seeing during the workshop. So the kids are doing the workshop, but then they're also having that chance to get into iReady, which is independent. They're taking the quizzes, they're having the lessons, but already, like, a lot of my kids, like, you can see the bar. And I would love to sit down and I can tell you about every student. But really, we do, like today, I had the chance to visit, Julia is working with our math. We are departmentalized in Florida Mesa 2nd through 5th. And so Julia has been working closely with our math teachers in a cohort. And so they started talking today. It was really neat to sit down because that's one thing about labs, you don't talk about data. Like up in Denver, you really don't. You talk more about the thinking, but really it's always that data that we come back to. Are they getting it? Are they successful? Are they not? And so today it was fun to sit down and just kind of come in at the end of the year and watch the relationships that the cohort has built. But we went into a lab and it was a different perspective where I was like going in with the lab of like, I'm really nice and like, take something, but it was really where we were critical or giving each other feedback. But we sat down and we went through the lesson and we put it into data. All we looked at for about an hour and a half was data. So we are looking constantly at data, and you'll see like Julia is moving forward with, this is something we're talking about, but cohorts out of Florida Mesa. And so taking that lab, but then also making it more intimate and building relationships amongst the teachers where we could go in and say, like today I heard a couple teachers like, man, that kid was off task. And like, but the other teacher was not defensive about it. It was like, give me help. And so it's really creating those relationships. But going back to that data piece, that's what we're moving forward with, because we definitely know that Florida Mesa, we need to move forward and have higher scores.
At a systems level, we are also looking at data to drive our decisions. The interesting leap that I'm trying to make that I can't find anyone else has ever made is our team has an input to teachers who then have a reflective process and an input to their students who then have their own learning process that has the final output of achievement. And to have that many levels of separation from the actual output is very complicated statistically, and I have not been able to, I like to follow other people who are much smarter than me in that, and I've yet to find anyone who has measured impact in that way. But we're certainly looking for ways. The best we're doing right now is we're measuring our year-long focus and the residual effects on that particular practice and our elements of effective instruction across them. Because mostly it's really to say, where do we go next and have we successfully accomplished this aim? And then as teachers, again, you mentioned like it's these pockets, right? We're not global, we're not across the organization to the extent that we would love to be. So it's these types of interactions where there is this very serious, tight look at year-long data, unit data, and I think it's funny that Tim is a data master at the moment. Every moment is a feedback loop every day. There's no wait for do we fill in the gap in an intervention somewhere. It's right then, right there. In fact, where you turn your homework in or your work in is called the feedback bucket. And so the data loop is just immediate and transferable. So absolutely there's a data-drivenness. And there's cool stories about their data in addition to their practice. But yeah.
It matches their practice.
Thank you.
This has been wonderful. We do need to let you guys go. I thank you so much for taking time to come to us and explain things. It's been very enlightening. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We look
Thank you all.
forward to the future with you. moving on, we're 6A, public participation and correspondence. This is the time where anyone in the public can give us a form and come and speak. We do have a time limit because we don't want to be here till 2 a.m., which we have been. So we appreciate you coming and offering to speak with us today. We have Emily Polster and Joe Kelly. No? Yes?
We
Sorry,
don't have a chair
isn't
for
it?
them to sit
Oops.
in. If they want to, they don't have. Sorry.
I'm good, Dan. Thank you.
Are you sure?
Really
Okay.
curious to put, yeah, standing with you next.
Okay, no worries.
So when you're ready, please give us your name and address, and keep in mind there is a bit of a time limit. 3 minutes, I believe, Sarah?
Does my name get factored into the time limit? Okay. Hi, I'm Emily. I'm good. Good on the chair. Thank you. I'm Emily Polster. My address is 265 Saltbrush Street. Please don't tell any students. It's in Durango. Okay. Thank you for listening. So this year I chose to expand my family. My partner and I are having a baby, as you can tell. I'm currently pregnant and I work full-time as a classroom teacher, which comes with its own struggles. When I planned to have a family, it was based on the insurance model from last year. Affording insurance would be a stretch, but pinching pennies, we may be able to afford insurance. For some perspective, being in the first cell on the pay scale gives you somewhere around $2,000 to $2,500 monthly. Rent in Durango is minimum $1,000 if you have a family like mine of 2 adults and 3 children. While this isn't accounting for my partner's income, the pay here is minimal, and affording to live in Durango was already a stretch. With the new insurance, it has become an impossibility. I find myself spending my planning time during the day looking at other private insurance options, looking to see if I qualify for Medicare or food stamps, and chatting with colleagues about the option of Mennonite insurance. We all know that before any of our kids are capable of learning, their basic needs have to be met. Our students need food, shelter, security, and to know that they are there at school, they are cared for, and that we care that they are there at school every day. Somewhere along the line, this stopped being true for teachers. My colleagues and myself, who are here, by the way, several of them, my colleagues and myself find it hard to afford food, shelter. We don't have security that our job will ensure our basic needs, one of which being affordable health care. And we are not positive that if we weren't here tomorrow, that anyone would care. I'm not being hyperbolic when I tell you that I work at the best school in Durango, or even in Colorado. My colleagues give their souls and their hearts to their jobs. They are always trying new and innovative things like learning labs and piloting iReady to engage students and to up the rigor. And every day that I've worked at Escalante, I have felt like one of the luckiest people to have gotten the job and become a part of such a great professional community. Lately, however, I wonder how long can I stay working at my favorite job with my favorite people and my favorite school in all of Colorado. I have to be pragmatic and realistic when looking at options for what is best for my family. I can't afford to live here and provide a quality of life for my family that is equal to those of my students. And that reality is hard to swallow. I am an optimist who has to resort to fight or flight, who needs to make the tough decisions for the sake of my family. I am an optimist who has become a realist. My point of sharing my story with you is not to provide a solution or to beg for answers. I'm a full-time teacher from 7 to 5 or 6 every day. Then I go home and I'm a full-time wife and a mother. I'm a full-time researcher of sale items at City Market, and I bet I could get hired on as an insurance sales representative after the last few months of research. My point is that this should not be my job too. The district, the board, and the people of Durango need to care and advocate for their teachers.
How much more do you have?
About 4 sentences.
Keep going.
Keep going.
Thank you. It is time that we are not the last people who are thought about and cared for. The consequences of not prioritizing teachers and their basic needs are that good and motivated teachers will quit and leave, not because they want to, but because they have to save themselves. We will be left with children who deserve better. We will be left with classrooms with no love and patience and understanding. The time has come for the district, the board, and the people of Durango to advocate for the basic needs of their teachers. Our future depends on it. Thank you.
Thank you. We have John, no last name?
John Heiss?
No, that's okay. You can tell us.
We won't take points off.
Sean, no names.
You're the only John.
You can start the clock now. I'm John Heiss. I sincerely apologize. Hi. John Heiss, teacher for this fine district for 28 years, resident of Durango for 33. I serve the community as both a teacher and as a parent. And so I didn't want my colleague to be a lone voice. And so over the last 28 years, I've been involved with a variety of, endeavors, initiatives in the district. Because like you all, like everybody here, you care about the community, you care about the children that are here. That's why we're here. And so within that, within the last year, I've, in talking with my colleagues in both my own building and across the district, there's been a rising theme in the chorus of voices, and that rising theme is around frustration. And those frustrations stem directly from things like increased deductions in our pay regarding insurance premiums a couple different times, decrease in employer pay-in as far as insurance is concerned, the freezing of coaches' salaries, the changing in the structure of payment around coaches' salaries. And I realize that, cognizant and respectful of the fact that the district and the board are in charge of those things, and that as an employee that I serve, right? But I do know this, that in 2009, when I served in the creation of that mission statement, which is in the process of being refashioned at this moment, that the strategic plan that we put together with the 7 identified strategies, that number one amongst those was communication. And that's the one that I had the great privilege of serving on with some colleagues that are actually in this room at this point, with not only business members from the community, but parents, teachers, students. It was a collective effort. And we deigned, at that point, chose, I guess deign's not the word for it, we chose at that point to point out that communication was number one. And you can still find that strategy online. It's around. And it's number one, and it reads as follows. We will improve internal and external communication with all our students, employees, and community members to build trust, transparency, and collaboration to best fulfill our mission. And so I realize that the insurance piece is part and parcel of a national issue that we all have to struggle with. But I do know that there are some things that we can manage as a district, and that's communication. That's respectful. And respectful communication is transparent, it's honest, and it's timely. And it would seem that in all those instances that I brought up in the past, that never once, well, with the exception of one, and we could talk more if you want to know more specifics about it, that it was never upfront, that it was always after the fact. I had to contact about why, was my coaching salary frozen? And the answer was yes. And I understand that that's part of the reality of what we're doing at this point. But if we would adhere back to those ideas about communication, then we could collectively work together, because this whole endeavor is the community. And as long as we're not upfront and transparent, we run the risk of creating conflict. And that conflict then can grow into frustration. So I'm just pleading at this point for a respectful return to communication as per, at least at this point, a strategy that we had adopted a decade ago. And I think was timely then and is still timely today. That's what I got.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was just going to say, at the next work meeting, one of the themes is communications and how to improve it. So we are aware and we are going forward. Yes.
I would like to say we've put a lot of time, the district has put a lot of time and effort into educating the teachers and the rest of our staff about the insurance rates, the different choices, and gone to the schools and held quite a lot of meetings so that everyone could ask questions. And we want people to fully understand why this is necessary. Nobody's happy about it. I appreciate John pointing out it's a national problem. We wish it could be different, but I do want to say I believe we've done due diligence with trying to educate all of our 12 schools and the faculties and staffs there about the need for it and the best way to approach it.
Moving on, Robin Baxendale, thank you.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go.
I'm Robin Baxendale. I don't really want to say my particular address, but I'm a resident of Durango.
Pardon me, we do require actually an address.
It's a safety thing. I could say Fur Drive in Durango West too.
Sure.
I am a special ed para at Miller Middle School, and I'm also a 9R parent and a community member, like I said. Today I'm here to talk to you about the meal charging policy of Durango 9R. And I'm not sure if you just saw the recent article that came out in the Durango Herald concerning this. What prompted it was a sign that was up at Miller Middle School, and it was basically saying that students that had charges of more than $8, which is like 3 meals, I guess, or less, would be given a partial meal for the rest of the year. And the partial meal is actually an alternative meal, which consists of a cheese stick and a piece of fruit, or a granola bar and a piece of fruit. And that is included in the definition of lunch shaming, which is holding children publicly accountable for their lunch balances. The USDA recommends that we don't go through children to collect the funds or use public shaming, schools are public, to collect the funds. We need to go through the parents, which you guys have been doing a good job of, but I would just like to say that when I talked to an admin in the nutrition department and I said, that's the way the USDA recommends going about this, she said, well, who's gonna do that? Are you gonna do that? No, I'm a special ed para, I'm not gonna do that. It's somebody's job, and if we don't know whose job it is, we need to get that clarified. Is it the principal, the counselors, the nutrition department? So, lunch shaming, Bayfield doesn't have a lunch shaming policy, so if you wanna look at a policy that doesn't include that, it's Bayfield. Jeffco has a really good meal charging policy. Donations. So I did an online Facebook collection. I raised $560 in less than 12 hours. And like a couple days later, I had a walk-in donation of $300. And that's set aside for Miller kids. As far as communication goes, I can't get a straight answer about other donations that came in through phone because I'm now being directed to Julie Pup instead of being allowed to talk with people who are directly involved in nutrition services. I would like, as far as I'm glad you're going to be talking about communication at your next working session, and if you could include this topic, that would be awesome. Just how you communicate with the parents, the staff, because the sign also included staff, which you could go to them, they're adults, and say, you know, you have these charges, can you pay them before you get some more meals from our cafeteria? And just the way that the public's dealt with when they have a criticism or comment, you know? It's important to be transparent and honest, like he said, and I feel like really supported by the public in this. I felt like the lone dancer, but I felt so much like strength through just people that have been emailing me, giving me hugs in the hallway, 167 comments on the Durango Herald. I'd say probably 160 of them are positive. So it's something I would like you guys to look at a working session is your lunch policy.
We don't have time to discuss this whole
It's
thing
fine.
I think you're missing quite a bit of information, and we'd like to make sure you get that. Dan, is there a way to provide her with that? Because we have extensive policies and practices that, from what you've said, I don't think you're aware of.
No, I read the whole thing. I
Yeah.
think there's certain people
But as
that,
far as the
yeah.
word shaming and things like that, I think we need to be more clear
Alternative
on
lunches
that.
is included in the definition of lunch shaming.
But I just think that it would be
It's outlawed in
helpful- I think it would be
10
helpful
states.
if you spoke with someone who really was expert and could answer a
Well,
lot
that
of
would
the
be nice. I
questions.
don't think Julie Pop is the expert.
Well, but let's not, we'll
Okay.
make sure you get somebody, okay?
Thank you. And yeah, I would like the parents and the community to be involved in this because they want to be. So,
Thank you for your
I'll
work.
follow up.
Sure.
with you. Thank you.
Okay, that's all? These three? Okay, we always appreciate you coming. If you or other people have things that you think that we need to know about, please use this time to inform us. Thank you. 7A, future bond planning updates.
Sure, this is just a follow-up on our conversation from the last work session regarding the bond. I think our last meeting, we discussed the bond option of moving forward with 2019 or 2020. And I think the board was leaning towards 2020. Did want to update the board. We had Animas High School present who would like to participate with us. They have applied for a waiver. The state does have for districts and entities that apply for the BEST grant and may not be able to meet their matching grant, in which case for Animas High School would be about $7 million that they can apply for a waiver, in which they can bring that local contribution down. So they have applied for the waiver, recognizing, I think, that the board and they feel like 2020 is probably the better time. I'll keep you posted as that process moves forward. But I did want to update you because I know that was something that many of you were still wondering about, is can we support our partners and still hold off? And I think right now we have some options that would allow us to do that. So, okay.
7B, budget update.
Yeah, budget update. I wish some folks would stick around because it's really,
No, it doesn't matter.
you know, it is a difficult situation, and I would certainly echo the frustration that the challenges of health insurance are definitely hitting all of us. You know, the district has continued to increase its contribution towards health insurance as well as employees having to increase their contribution. And the sad reality is our usage is is exceeding the amount of revenue that we're putting into our health account, and that really becomes the major challenge for us, is trying to explore those options. At the last meeting, I shared that we were, based upon expected revenues and all of the school staffing needs, all of the school supply needs, school curricular needs, we were at $1 million in the hole. Today, with the cuts and the work that we've done as an administrative team and really analyzing the budget, we brought that deficit down to $345,000. And just to be very clear, we have three objectives when we look at expenditures in the district. The first one is what's best interest of students to achieve the results that you've set, not only academic but social emotional results. What's necessary to continue to successfully implement our 9R learning model, or personalized competency-based learning. And then what's necessary to ensure that learning environments are safe and secure. So those are our three key priorities, that if something doesn't touch on one of those, then we set it aside and say maybe that's something we need to wait on. So as we've gone through department budgets, last week we spent an entire day with each of our department leaders looking at their budget, really prioritizing their needs and the spending in those departments. We've also shifted some of our curriculum dollars. We've shifted directly to the school. I think one of the things we've done in the past is we've gone through a pretty elaborate process where schools would apply for curriculum resource materials that their instructional leadership teams, that's the teachers and the administration at the school, feel they need to really enhance their program. We've moved to a proportional allocation. So we are now allocating out to each school $120 per student, which are dollars that they manage, and working with our curriculum and assessment department to really determine those needs that will allow us to continue to move our results in the direction that we need to move them. That's about $500,000 of spending that's being allocated back out to schools as well. Again, in the sheet that's attached to the board agenda item, we have $1.8 million in salary increases. 81.4% of our staff will be moving on the salary scale. And those movements are sometimes anywhere between 2 and 8% salary increases. We also have the attendance incentive payout that every teacher is eligible for, which is about $1,100 if you achieve the maximum attendance incentive, $500 for support staff. And granted, people get sick, so that proportionally drops depending on how many days of your leave time that you may have used. But again, I think we've continued to try to maximize revenue for our teachers and trying to make sure, and our support staff, and trying to make sure that we honor that pay raise. It's important to note that, again, pay raises are automatic in our district. No longer does the board determine if we get a pay raise. Your negotiated agreements that are in place with our two associations guarantee movement based upon the earnings of the teacher, and I think that's something very unique. There are districts around us that are still waiting for their board to determine do they get to advance or not. So again, $1.8 million right now in increased salaries in this budget. That's salaries and benefits. So again, we have $345,000 that still needs to be cut. We've cut positions at central office to the tune of $206,000 so far. I'm still looking at our staffing in our departments. You heard this evening about the support of our instructional specialists and the work that they're doing that's really moving student achievement. I think that's really important to note. And so we'll continue to analyze budgets. This does reflect some potential good news in Senate Bill 19246, which is the School Finance Act that finally was introduced last week. That does propose some rural funding again. Right now we've been conservative in about $500,000 of rural funding that we believe, based upon the chatter and the conversations happening at the legislative level, will likely survive. That's what's included in this. This year we had $835,000, so that's about $335,000 short of what we had this year. It does include some additional buy down for the negative factor, the BS factor that we've talked about in the past. So we're pretty close to having a balanced budget. What we are working on right now is continuing to break this down into very clear and concise formats, so that as we go out for our budget hearing in a couple of weeks to our community, we can show all of the spending that exists in each of those department budgets, as well as at the school level, so that we can be accountable. But again, we're pleased that we're closer than we were 2 weeks ago, but we certainly are not done yet. So, questions?
Dan, did I hear you say 87% of our
81,
teachers, 81% are going to make a move? I just want to make sure they're going to have, okay. And then we already do full day kindergarten, so there's not any more expenses associated with that.
Correct.
And the $500K that you're anticipating will probably get, is that, well, did you already figure that in with our deficit?
Correct.
So we're still a little bit in
So all of the
deficit.
good news is still in here with the $345,000.
Gotcha.
So again, we still have $345,000 that we're looking to trim. We're looking at things like salaries. Give you one example for the teachers who have already declared their retirements. Many of them are at the top of the scale. The most a teacher can come into our district is about $52,000. When you look at the teachers who have declared their retirement and the likely most expensive teacher that would come in to replace them, that's about $100,000 in savings. So those are the types of things right now that we're really scrubbing to make sure that we can account for every dollar and ultimately be able to balance the budget.
You said 81% of the teachers are going to move. What about just?
81.4% of all staff.
All staff.
All
Good,
staff,
good.
correct.
I have a question. The supplies and materials budget went up by almost triple. Is there, I don't know.
Sam?
Just curious.
So what you'll see on the expenses is there's some placeholders and there's notes below that kind of explain.
Okay.
So discretionary budgets that went out to departments and schools that cover things like contracted services, some purchase services or new equipment, or supplies or potentially substitutes, mileage stipends, all sorts of different things. That's just the placeholder of the amount. So that is not just, and that will not stay there. It's just for a comparison of total expenses.
All right.
Yeah. The same with that property line and the other expenses line.
Okay.
So there's notes below that will kind of explain what those numbers are made up
It's an odd
of.
place for the kinds of things that you're talking about, though, like.
Truly just a placeholder.
Okay.
It will
All right.
not appear in your final budget at
Okay.
all in any way, shape, or form
All right,
like that.
that one stuck out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, because discretionary budgets, until we get those all back, I don't know how much a school's gonna wanna allocate to their school paid substitute line, nor do I know necessarily who's gonna be traveling between schools and need mileage reimbursements.
But those will be distributed among other.
Yes,
Yeah.
they'll
Other budget
all go
line
to other
items.
lines.
Correct.
Yes, absolutely.
Correct. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Other questions while I'm here?
Dan, since we have some new people and some students, can you explain like what we see now and what we're going to see in the final budget?
Sure, this is an overview. What you'll see in the final budget will be a more detailed based upon department, based upon school site. So all of those dollars that are allocated at school sites, staffing at school sites will be shown at those school sites. And then in the categories that are like purchase services, we will break those out so you know how much is this educational resource, how much is that, so that folks can really see the detail of what's in each of those lines. So that as we have discussions, our first meeting with the community really will be to show them the prioritization that we've put into the budget and get feedback from them prior to actually finalizing a budget and bringing that back to FAC and to you. That'll be the first attempt, and that'll be the first week in May, where we'll invite the community to come in and get those detailed breakdowns of what are the prioritizations that we've made and how they fit those three key objectives, and certainly get that feedback before we come back to you. And certainly we hope you'll be able to join us for that meeting.
And could you, in 3 sentences or less, tell us the process for creating this?
Yeah, you know, we start by sending out to all, first to schools based upon projected enrollment. So we have a per student allocation for school discretionary expenses. This year we've added that curriculum discretionary expenses that schools will manage. So that goes out off the top. We look at staffing. So staffing is being 80-some% of our budget. Staffing is the first thing
85.
we actually do. I'm sorry?
85%.
85% of our budget is staffing. So staffing, I shared with you several meetings ago, the staffing rationale that we use to actually allocate staffing to buildings and work with their SACs and their ILTs to determine how they wish to use that FT. We no longer say you have to have a reading teacher and you have to do, we really say here's your staffing, now you design your staff to meet the needs of your building. And so that's 85% of the budget. Then our departments submit their budgets based upon needs, based upon the work that their division or department's doing to meet the board's expectations, the operational expectations, the results policies. And then we put them through that process of really meeting with our cabinet and justifying why they feel that's such an important need. We also make sure that we don't have two departments a budget for the same thing. For instance, learning management system, sometimes our student information services will budget and our curriculum department will budget. And so going through that process allows us to make sure we haven't double booked expenses because something may touch more than one single department. And then once we get to a point like we were 2 weeks ago where we were $1 million in the hole, then we bring department leaders back in to say, okay, here's the figure we need to look for. We always start at central office. We don't go to schools and say, hey, cut $1 million for us. We always start centrally to say, what can we trim here? And typically our experience has been that ultimately in the end we find the balancing act centrally. Very seldomly, I think 2 years ago we did ask schools for a 5% rescission when we had a drop in student enrollment, and we had to account for a cut mid-year. But typically that's not the process. Typically we cut here at central office.
Thank you.
That was more than 3 sentences, so.
Can I work on that?
Only a few.
No, that's really helpful though, because, we get these sheets of numbers and it's like, where did they come from? How did they get there? Why are they there? That kind of stuff. So even for us who've been here a while, it's nice to be reminded the thorough process that you guys go through.
One more important process is also then looking at new students coming in. So in preschool, we have a number of students who have high needs. Now they're transitioning to kindergarten. So typically paraprofessionals, where we have students whose needs are so great that they need that one-on-one type support or that constant support. Students who we know are moving in. Marcy is already getting calls from families who are moving here next year whose children may have significant needs. And so there'll be emails almost on a daily basis. Whoops, we're going to have to add a paraprofessional here, or we're going to have to add another special ed teacher here because caseload has exceeded what we believe to be a reasonable caseload for our special education teachers. So all of that is a constant moving target between now and June, and will continue after June. I mean, after June, once the budget's set, then we know anything we do has to have a corresponding cut. So if we have to add staff and we don't have it in the budget, and we have to add a teacher, then we know we have to go find $65,000 to $70,000 somewhere to make up for that, because our contingency line will not meet all of those needs. So Sam keeps a running total all the time of, okay, we went up here and we dropped there, and so we're constantly playing that game.
There's something you said there, like you said, teacher might cost $65,000 to $70,000, but that's not the average salary.
Right. No, that's with benefits.
Like if you're making
Yeah.
$40,000 or $50,000, how much does it cost?
Our benefits are running 33%.
33%.
Yep, so you can basically add 33% to any salary in the district, and that is our average benefit load. Para and Medicare next year alone will be 21.85% of that, and then the remainder is health insurance, and like long-term disability and life insurance, and those are really tiny though. Yeah.
I think that's important to be aware of.
Yes. With the example you were just giving in terms of having a lot more high-need students coming in, and so those will be sort of adding more paraprofessionals or more special ed teachers. At what point, or are there processes already underway to kind of reconsider that model of, while adding paraprofessionals sounds like it would be quite expensive, maybe there's a different model to approaching, say, the special ed department or what have you, that would be perhaps more cost effective. So what does that
we constantly look at that. We do have, in some cases, we have centers in our district where we have concentration of students. Sometimes that's a family decision, and free and appropriate public education, the least restrictive environment comes into play. So we have to look at the child's needs. We have to look at, can we meet their needs in a school? Do we need to move them to a center-based program? We met with principals last week, secondary principals on Thursday and elementary principals on Friday, to really look at our exceptional student services needs and the growing needs within our school and our population. Fort Lewis Mesa has about 20% special education needs right now, which is almost double the district. And so when you have a small school like that and you have that significant of needs, moving all of those students into town would cause that school to be about 80 students. And so then you get to the point of, do you move those students or do you move services to those students? And so all of those are considerations that we take into account. We definitely have in the past few years really moved towards let's serve students at their home school where we can. I think we are clearly looking at, are there times where a student can better be served where resources are? We would love to add 3 or 4 more preschools where we could have a concentration of special ed supports, because preschool students arrive all year. So we have special ed preschool students who arrive in September, and we have to put them in a program because we're required to serve them. And so sometimes that program may not have space available. We have so many preschool needs. We have such a waiting list in our community. We can't hold spots, because then we have children who really should have a preschool experience, may not have as significant of needs as maybe a student with disabilities, but still require preschool education. And so it is we're constantly trying to be agile in our systems so that we can meet the needs of all students. We would love to have, down the road, as we think about new schools, we'd love to have a concentration of preschool classrooms where we could reserve some spots so that when those late arrivals come, that it's a central location, that we can serve them, that we can have concentrated services, and we're not in this position of having to hire a para because that child has to go into this program because that's the only slot available. We don't have the ability by state rules to add a 17th child to a preschool classroom. It's capped at 16, that's licensed, that's what we're allowed to have. And we're not in the position of telling a preschooler, sorry, you can't come to school anymore, we have another child who gets your slot. So it's a balancing act, and that's really the challenge that we face and the challenge we're constantly trying to manage in our system.
And I think, to your point, Dan, special education costs within our district are a huge driver of our general fund expenses. I know that people may think that we get a ton of money from the state and from the federal government towards those ends, but the federal government and state proportion of special education fundings may be 1/3 of what we spend in total. So it is a very expensive part of our required education.
I certainly don't know if this is accurate, but I've heard a few people say that we have like 70% more paraprofessionals than other districts of comparable proportions of special needs students, and so it just sounds like that could be an area for.
We have a number of schools right now that are adding a teacher in lieu of paras, just because of that caseload becoming so large that it's more economical and more feasible to add a teacher than 3 paras. And so we are looking at a number of those. A para, 2.5 paras is equal to about what a teacher cost is. And so when you look at that ratio, that is something that we're continuing to look at. Is there a relationship, or is there a better model within each school to meet the needs of that community? So that's definitely something we're taking into account.
And one of the reasons we have that situation is what's the phrasing? It's a problem because we're so good at what we do with special ed. People bring their students from quite a ways away to this district. So we have a much higher percentage of special ed students because we have better services, frankly.
But the numbers, I guess, looking at the same, say we have 20% special ed in our district, and another district has 20% special ed, we still have a larger proportion of paraprofessionals, is what, like, holding the number of students in special ed constant.
Yeah, and I think I think that's something that we'd love to get some teacher feedback on, because more often than not, where we get the requests for paraprofessional support is from our licensed staff who feel overwhelmed by having that student's needs in the classroom. And so we're obligated to serve them in the least restrictive environment, and so that becomes a challenge that we've got to always balance.
Any questions? Okay, thank you, Dan. That was really helpful. Thank you, Sam. 7C, results information.
So I'm kind of excited. We have some results on the agenda tonight. We're going to continue.
A boy was and a boy.
A boy and a moy.
A boy and a moy.
Yeah. If we could start first with the development of students' knowledge and skills document. It's really important that as we've worked on our personalized competency-based learning, or what we're transitioning to calling the 9R learning model, that we really understand the levels of knowledge and how they're broken down. Certainly we have our state standards, and when you think about our state standards, we think about those broad categories like I put here, the math, number and quantity, algebra and functions, data and statistics, and probability and geometry. Those are the 4 breakdowns of the areas of standards for math across the grade levels. Then we have prepared graduate competencies, which in Colorado outlines really at the end of the road, what is a prepared graduate able to do as a result of those standards. We use this terminology called performance indicators, and performance indicators are really, when you heard the lab teachers talk about depth and complexity, it's really that we believe strongly in our district that learning something means you can apply it, that if you don't just regurgitate it, but you can take that knowledge and apply it in a variety of settings across content in some cases. So our performance indicators as a district are kind of at that middle level where we're looking for the application of those skills that students are learning. And right now we have them in grade bands, K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 12. We're looking at potentially expanding that further to provide grade level indicators that will help hopefully focus our teachers a little more on what they're responsible for. In the state standards, we have grade level expectations, and in many cases, they're very similar to our performance indicators. In some areas, they are not. There's no verbs in a grade level expectation. I believe it's in social studies, for example. So our performance indicators sometimes are comparable to grade level expectations, and other cases, it takes a grade level expectation and adds the verb of what do students do as a result so that they can actually demonstrate that. And then we have the evidence outcome level, or what some will know as a Common Core Standards level, where there's a CCSS reference. Our formative data, which is what I'm bringing you tonight, really is at that building block level. So when we think about our students and their learning, it's really about those building block levels that are critical. You can't build a house without the bricks and the windows and the foundation. You need all of those pieces to ultimately build the house. Our evidence outcomes, you have to really be able to master to be able to do those performance indicators. And so our formative data that we're collecting, we've moved towards, this past year we tried 3 systems. We tried iReady, we tried STAR, and we tried FastBridge. And our schools chose the ones they felt best represented or provided them the data that they needed. And some would say, gosh, it would have been better for you to have chosen one. Well, we really wanted our schools to own and to have value in their data, so we allowed that choice option. Actually, iReady was not even one we originally offered, and Park Elementary brought it and said, we'd like to look at this one, and we supported them and saying, we'll try that one. Well, lo and behold, iReady has really become the premier tool that most of our schools are navigating to. What I brought you tonight is the formative data from many of our elementary schools. Sunnysides, I did not get them on here. I received that today, so I'll be adding Sunnysides to this. Fort Lewis Mesa, I'm in the process of securing their data without their principal, who was the data accessor. I did not get that either before this report, but you'll be able to see Florida Mesa and Park Elementary have been using consistently iReady since the beginning of the year. So the beginning of the year reading data and the beginning of the year math data is, I was keeping you in suspense until I defined BOI and EOI. Beginning of year reading data shows the number of students. Now, iReady breaks it into Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. Tier 1 means on grade level, meeting expectations. Tier 2 means needing some additional support. Tier 3 means intensive intervention or intensive support may be needed. And so when you look at the beginning of the year reading compared to middle of the year reading, you certainly see the movement that I think we're all hoping. We all want to see that. The good news is that with iReady, there's a lot of suggestion that the middle of the year benchmark really does mimic what CMAS ultimately will show, what Park will show. So if that pans out, we're going to see some really positive gains in our students. What's really powerful about this data is it gives our teachers the detail of what they need to do tomorrow. Meaning this is a skill they don't have, and this is something I can form a group, I can do some direct instruction. With iReady, there's actually some curriculum that many of our schools are using where students can actually access the skill that they're deficient in and really fill that gap and we're showing great gains for students who are accessing that curriculum. At Riverview, Riverview was a school that chose STAR, and STAR is a program that Miller Middle School and Durango High School used. I'll bring secondary data next week. But they also have they have 4 categories. They have at or above grade level. They have in a watch, meaning they're pretty close. They're in that cusp range. Intervention and urgent intervention. So again, very similar type of data on that evidence outcome building block level that's showing how our students are moving in those categories. And again, this is providing real-time data. I didn't want to interrupt our lab teachers, but I will tell you that most of our lab teachers are outperforming their peers on this formative data because their students are actively, mindfully engaged in that depth and complexity of learning. And that's really important, is that as we transition next year, we are leaning towards moving towards iReady. We still have some schools that are having conversations. We do want it to be something their teachers believe in, so we don't want to force a move, but we really are encouraging that, and I think most of our schools are really interested in doing that. Needham used FastBridge, which had a social emotional component that they really found very helpful, but they have also made the decision to move towards iReady, and their data did not present in the similar fashion, so it's not on here. If anyone's interested in that Needham data, we can certainly share that with you. It's just a little different format. So, you know, the schools that didn't have the iReady at the beginning of the year, Animas started mid-year. We don't have beginning of the year data for them. We have mid-year. We'll have end of the year data. So this would certainly be data that I believe will be helpful as we look at our ultimate judgment of our results policies and how we're moving students. Really excited that you know, as you look at the primary grade levels with this type of data, you'll see many of those grade levels that have 0% who are at a tier 3 or intensive intervention. And I think that's, again, giving our teachers the data in real time that they need to be able to really adjust instruction and move students. So I'm excited about this. I think our principals are excited to have a data source that gives them the day-to-day. Ultimately, our goal is the summative data, though. It's still about, can our students take this knowledge and apply it in a fashion that allows us to know that they've really deeply learned that, and that's where we're working with our performance indicators and our summative demonstrations of learning. So the summative data will come through another means. This will be our formative data measure that we'll be able to present to you on a regular basis. All of these have progress monitoring tools as well, so for the student that is being supported, we can assess them throughout in between those benchmark periods to make sure that they're moving in the areas that we're trying to target. No questions?
So eventually, I mean, I understand not wanting to force anyone to use a system that they're not really, and maybe in this case, it's not apples to oranges, but that would be my concern, is that you want to have all the apples with all the apples.
I think the schools that are doing STAR, again, you see very similar data reporting.
It's not that much different.
So it really is a matter of wanting teachers to see the data, see the features of both systems, and to make that navigation. I'm pretty confident. I think we'll be at least 95% iReady next year. We may have some who still are trying to use STAR, but again, the data is so comparable that I don't know that that's going to be a problem for us. So I think John Pearl, speaking from the high school, would love to have everyone on one, because that gives him consistent data as students arrive at his door. And so iReady is a little more expensive than STAR. So that's the one thing is, again, you know, expenditures. Do you pay less for something that doesn't do for you what you can pay a little more for and get? And so sometimes it's easy to say, well, go with the cheaper one. Well, if the cheaper one's not moving students, is it worth spending less money, or is it worth spending more? The curriculum for iReady is about double the cost. But again, where we see schools like Park Elementary had massive gains last year, iReady, we believe, had a large portion, or had a large part in moving some of that, because they had really relevant data that allowed instructional decisions to be made immediately.
Have the people using STAR seen iReady, so they?
We're in the process of sharing, yes. We've authorized some licenses at different schools.
You don't know what to choose if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, exactly.
And The curriculum that students are offered if they're in one of these tiers that needs help, what does that look like?
In some cases, it's an interventionist who's pulling a group with common needs, so they're actually using instructional materials in the building. They may be using intervention programs they already have. In other cases, it may be just redirect instruction of that skill to that group of students who need it. So it's a variety of ways. It's like you've got to know what the problem is before you can treat it, and so this is identifying the problem. And then I'd say each of our schools have different strategies. In some cases, it's a classroom teacher who's intervening in that small group. In other cases, it's the interventionists who are pulling small groups from across the grade level to deliver instruction for those students.
So I guess you said that iReady includes curriculum.
The curriculum is it's a component that students, if they use it 45 minutes a week, the evidence and the research shows that students make above average gains. And so it's using it more doesn't make you get even higher gains. It really is 45 minutes a week. It's designed to be no more than 45
So
minutes
it's a computerized.
It's a computerized
Okay.
intervention that takes the student performance data and really targets the areas that they need to fill in.
Dan, do you know if it includes eye tracking? That's a real issue for a small percentage of students.
Sure.
They don't,
Yeah, I'll have to check and see. I couldn't
it would be
answer
good, I would like to know that, because when they don't track, they don't make the same kind of gains.
That's a good question. Sure. Just first really quickly, so iReady is available for secondary and for secondary schools, but we don't use it, but it is.
It
built
is,
for that
it
as
is a
well.
K-12, yeah,
Okay.
K-12 or pre-K-12 component.
Cool, thank you. I think you did say that earlier, sorry. And then, does iReady or STAR, do they provide essentially sort of normed or national or average data for our gains? Because these do look
Yes.
fantastic, right? But
Yeah.
what
And
is the average?
one of the reports, and I asked some schools to send me their proficiency data, which is what you have here. There are some gains reports. So you heard one of our teachers, Ms. Duval, talk about above average growth or stretch goals. It does measure students who hit stretch goals, which is more than a year and a half's worth of growth on average for the year. And so there are goals that are set within the system that allow us to really track growth.
Okay.
So, and that's a whole separate report.
Sure.
What I tried to do was provide you common data, and that's certainly another report we could bring back on how many students, how
Yeah.
they're growing.
So
within
I'd
that.
love that. With, you're not gonna be surprised by this next one. I'd love a breakdown. Is it possible, and to what extent are people looking at the students who are making the gains? Do they tend to be from a certain gender identification? Do they tend to be from a
Yep,
certain ethnicity?
we can break it down by demographic
And
data.
Yeah,
Yep.
all that.
Wanted to get you the overall data first, but
Thank
definitely
you.
we can dig deeper.
Appreciate it.
Yep. This has been really a school-based initiative. It's not been a district initiative. It will be for next year. So we are taking the district license. We'll be providing more direct support as schools were experiencing the different systems they wanted to use. Really was a school effort. Our intent for next year is really to bring this internal so that we can support with some of the reporting. For this, I actually needed to go to each school and say, please send me your data so that I could combine it for you. So
Yeah,
next year, that won't be the process.
Right, because we've talked about this before, but it'd be great for principals to be able to look at other schools' data, to be able to say, oh, you're doing this really well, I want to know how, much like the coaches situation, but to do that with the principals.
I appreciate too that you're giving schools choices and not jumping in, just dumping something on people and then finding out if it works or not. This is a really nice progressive approach. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Preschool Kids Camp 8A.
This needs a motion.
Oh, yes. We have a motion?
I move the board approve the attached fee schedule for the 2019-20 school year as, oh no, am I in the wrong place?
Yep.
You're fine,
You're right.
2019, 20.
As presented.
Second,
So these are the fees that we discussed last work session around an increase for preschool and kids camp. Those are both programs that, again, we're trying to ensure that they are covering the costs within the model. And so it's a 50 cent increase per day for kids camp. and a $20 per month increase for full-time preschool students. We will have some preschool slots that we'll be able to use for students in need that will cover a full-day program next year. We'll actually have some increased flexibility with that, but these are for students who don't meet those qualifications but whose parents wish to pay for preschool. So it's only that element of our population.
Is preschool still 4 days?
Preschool is still 4 days.
Any questions, comments? You ready to vote?
Yep.
Sherry Bird.
Aye.
Stephanie Moran.
Aye.
Nancy Stokes.
Aye.
Mariana Valdez.
Aye.
9A, staff board dinner, wait. That there?
Yeah, you're right.
Oh, I thought I skipped a page. Okay, sorry. Staff board dinner debrief. This is the dinner that Sherry and Stephanie and Nick and I went to with the staff at Riverview. Great food, thank you, Sarah. And we had a decent turnout. We had about 18 people. We'd like to.
And Paula, she was.
Paula, that's right. It was so great. Paula is setting a really good precedent for reaching out and doing more. Thank you. So, do you want to make some comments, or you want to share? I don't want full report because we did kind of that thing, but just some impressions, or maybe talk about where this can go or what we want to do in the future.
Well, the group that I sat with was primarily admin assistants, and some of the concerns or some of the topics that came up were that because of the new safety implementations that we're doing at schools and because of other things that are going on, a lot of them are taking on job responsibilities that they hadn't originally had. And it's not that they're begrudging those responsibilities, but they're having a hard time managing everything that they're being asked to do in their building. And I asked about whether they had written job descriptions and how often their job descriptions were updated, and I don't think anybody knew. So I think that's something that the school district needs to look at, is a regular review of what a job description is for those individuals, and if their job description is expanding beyond capacity, then we need to talk about some of those issues. Amazingly enough, insurance did not come up at my table, but that kind of plus main office staff are often being asked to be the holding area for students who are having problems or being, and they don't feel like they're really trained to deal with that sometimes. And they're taking care of things, and then a student is left in the office until somebody shows up to deal with them, and so they didn't feel like they were very well trained. And so again, the issue of communication has been coming up, and so they wanted to have access to some of the same professional development training that might be appropriate for what they do in their jobs. And they also felt like more of a team mentality, so that there wasn't always a dependence on these few people who sat in a meeting, then were relied upon to disseminate the information to the next set of people, who were then relied upon to disseminate the information to the next set, and they felt like there was a lot lost in that process, and that the people who were important to it should probably be at the one meeting. But those were the main sources of conversation that we kind of had, was sort of changing job descriptions or changing responsibilities, and how they could best be prepared, and how the district could develop more of a, and I don't say that we're not, but work on team mentality so that the appropriate people are all in a conversation that they need to be in on. That was the conversation at my table. Did I catch that right, Paula?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Anything you want to add?
Well, it was really an amazing experience, though, and I was happy to be in that table as well. Or any table would have been amazing, honestly. But it was really cool to hear just how much input they had to give to the board, and I believe that one of the things that was really brought up was communication in that aspect. So I feel like working on that might be a great way, as well as training for some people.
And we do review our job descriptions on a cycle. I can say that since we've implemented some of those, it probably would be wise for us to review that job description, so we'll take that into account.
My table, two main issues. One was brought up by one of our bus drivers who feels very strongly that having to grapple with the tablet and the card, that it would be better if we had one card that worked for the buses and lunch and whatever other ID-related activities there are. But his concern was really around how very many distractions there are, and that the tablet system makes it impossible to connect well with the students. And that really, as we have often espoused, our bus drivers, our custodians, our cooks, and everybody else from front office to back office can make a huge impact on our kids. So we really ask that we look at the card system because there are so many flaws with it. And we heard that from Daniel at the DAC meeting last month. And then the second one, I really apologize that I don't have my paper from Carl Peterson. He's at Escalante. And remember last year when Kathy asked whether we'd be willing to have anybody armed in our schools, I said, bring us a proposal. He brought a proposal. And I can share, maybe I can have Sarah copy and fax to the board, because what he's proposing I could probably get behind. There are 3 levels, 3 criteria, be at least 10 years as a police officer, hit a certain mark, literally, figuratively. Anyway, it's something that that is probably worth our looking at. He's a retired police captain of 26 years, 10 years more on a SWAT team, and he says he feels very uncomfortable not being able to do a 360 with a weapon, that there's only so much he could do. So I was pretty interested in that because he basically brought what I asked Kathy.
We actually are bringing that to you next month.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he is one of our lead security specialists.
Good.
So.
Yeah. So that, I'll be interested to see how that works out.
Okay.
Mine was similar to what you've heard already. I won't repeat it. I think the job description is good because I think what happens, especially with paras, is that maybe by osmosis they take on more and more because of their particular role, and it becomes blurred where the lines are and how many hours and things like that. What I came away with mostly was the dedication, the care, the involvement, the amazing motivation, and just wanting to be successful and contribute to the district. I am so impressed with our staff. They're just, you go and you think, okay, these are staff, they're working here, they're nice people, but there's so much more than that. It's just amazing. And what came up in kind of a short discussion after hours was the willingness to be involved in looking at their own roles and where can more efficiency be put in and where can they be part of the solution to the many issues that go on in the district. And I think if we, I don't want to suggest anything now, but if we start looking at how can we better use the knowledge and the skills, would be very beneficial to the district. So, the other suggestion was that, coming at the end of the year, it was kind of hard to get enough people there. And they felt like it might be better at the beginning of the year, so we might look at, if we have time, a beginning and ending, like where do we want to go, and then how did we do kind of thing. But we have a lot of those kind of meetings, so we'll have to see how they can all be put on a calendar. But, 9B, Board Communication Development. We're actually going to be working on this next time. Is there anything anybody feels like they want to say at this time before our work meeting?
With my part, I apologize.
Yeah.
I'll get there.
I think that's pretty much on hold, isn't it? Dan, did you have anything you wanted to?
No, I think we've added Steph had sent her stuff, so it's in
Right.
here as well. So really just keeping it in front of you, that was the only point.
Yeah. And just make sure that we have it read before the work meeting, and Mick is going to lead an activity where we kind of priorities and get it on the calendar. Oops. Hey, what happened here?
We're up to 10, yeah.
No,
Great.
we're on 9C.
No,
9C.
oh, yeah, that's right, we need to hear from Paula.
Or,
Student Board Member Report,
Oh,
9C.
10A. Anyway,
The very last one.
ta-da! Take it away, Paula.
Okay. Well, this is just like a kind of debrief that I wanted to give to the board. I did send out a survey to all students in the school, and 50 students ended up taking it. Several questions I asked them was like, do you know what the board is, or what the board does? Is pretty much what I asked them. 78%, so 39 students said that they did not know what the board does, or what it is, or what it stands for. And then I asked follow-up questions such as like, would you like to know what the board is? Along with that, 80% would like to know the importance of the board. So that comes out to 40 students. I asked for suggestions as to how they can better know about the board. One of the things that I hear a lot throughout the school is that timing, so the public board meetings are usually kind of not good with their timing, because they do end up having to go home and do homework or extra things or activities after school. So then 32 students, so 64% of the people that did the survey, suggested having a pick-me-up. So it's those Monday things that we do every week, at least once a year with the board. With that is also a circle up, in which the board can get information or opinions on the whole students there. So it's pretty much just like, I think I need to explain what sort of circle is.
So like a dialogue?
Yes, something along those lines, as well as what.
It's like a community gathering.
Yeah.
And I would want to organize some kind of thing in that, and then you could actually get information from students on what they want to see in the board.
So before the meeting, you'd get it kind of organized, the topics and the information, and then we'd come and participate.
Right.
Yeah.
And then as time went by, I was able to have a one-on-one with 5 of these students, and they suggested that maybe having the board, or at least one of the members of the board, coming in once or twice a year to just sit in on the circle up. So how are you on a scale from 1 to 10 is usually our like beginner of this, and then have a more personal connection with a board member. In which they can feel comfortable maybe coming later on to the meetings and sit in on some of these occasions, is what I got from it. That was pretty much it. I just wanted to let the board know. We still have some pick-me-ups left of this school year, if you guys are still interested in coming before the end of the year.
And you
too.
let us know when
if you let us know when they are, we can figure it out.
So they're on Mondays from 2 to 2:30, and I could probably set that up with Bradley, or you guys can speak with Bradley. 1 or 2 members can come over, or the whole members can just come and just kind of talk with the students and let them know what it is.
It's every
I will
Monday?
say, Yeah, Monday from 2 to 2:30. It honestly, it wasn't that shocking that 39 out of the 50 students didn't know what it was.
I wouldn't have.
I didn't know there was one.
So another thing I guess I did ask them is like, what's a good way for students to reach you out, especially representatives? And they said email or surveys are really good. They would be more than likely to answer opinionated surveys in order to get their words out there as well.
Like questionnaires would be helpful. I guess like figuring out a way to get students in contact with the representatives, and then the representatives can bring their ideas to the board.
That'd be better for us, I think.
Yeah, just wanted to kind of put it out there because I did get quite a bit of information, and I feel like knowing about the board, it is really important, especially with everything that they do. I was honestly kind of shook in the beginning of all this, like this is all that you guys do, so I have more appreciation towards it for sure. So.
Well, thanks for doing the survey.
Yeah,
This is great.
Well, that wouldn't work at your school because it's so big, but is there a way, are there meetings or something that we could come to once in a while and people could ask? Student council probably is not the place.
Why not?
Well, maybe.
They're the representatives
That's true, yeah.
for the rest
I was
of
just
the.
thinking you have agendas, but you could fit us in.
No, yeah. I mean, the meeting with Dan was really helpful. We had incredible attendance. I would say more than 100 students
Wow.
were there. And it was really informative for them, and they got to ask their questions and get direct answers. So that was great. I think continuing to do those would be beneficial. Student council holds EDT every other Thursday, and it's like a professional development where we're taught leadership skills and we're informed by our advisor, Dale Garland, but we're thinking of moving it towards not just being advised by Dale and being advised by leaders throughout the community. So if you guys would be interested in that, you could communicate with the executive members either this year or next year, and they could always have you lead a lesson or just a conversation. And then I think our newspaper is one of the best in the state, so if you would get in contact with the El Diablo, or the student rep could do that for you and arrange an interview in which they ask some of the most widely held questions. You could have that published, and our newspaper is pretty well read.
Yeah. I think it's one of the most widely distributed and read high school papers.
And it's really highly acclaimed, and they've been recognized in the state for multiple years.
I don't think there's, is that normal for a school newspaper to go out with the newspaper and have that big
I
a
think it's just a
audience?
partnership that's been fostered for a long time, so.
That's really amazed me that was going on when I first came here. Because that's a great audience for the students and incentive to be professional and,
Sure.
yeah, it's great. Those are good ideas. We will add them to our list for our next meeting of communications. And you know, Paul, that you're welcome to come to work meetings also. Paul, right? Yes.
Oh, thanks.
Executive session. Do you want me to make a move?
Oh, I see what this is, okay. Yeah, we need a motion for executive session.
I move that the board go into executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel decisions as authorized by CRS 246402-4F. Those present in executive session should be members of the Board of Education, the superintendent, the director of human resources, the board clerk, and named staff members.
A second?
Second.
Aye.
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 Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll go in first.